It has been more than 4 months since Vanessa was tragically taken from us. Not a day goes by that we don't reflect on the enormity of our loss.
Not a day goes by that we don't think about her, said Vanessa's uncle. His voice cracked with emotion, standing outside a courtroom with holding back tears. The weight behind his words said it all. Vanessa Marcotte was 27 years old. She worked at Google. She was a smart, focused, and kind girl. That Sunday, she went out for a short jog near her mother's house and never came back. Princeton, Massachusetts was a peaceful town. For decades, there hadn't been a single murder. So when Vanessa suddenly vanished in the middle of the afternoon, no one knew how to react. What followed was a search that turned into something far worse. Within hours, her family's worst fears were confirmed. And what happened in that short time, less than 2 hours, would leave an entire community shocked. Who could have done this to her? Why there, on a quiet road she knew well? The answers didn't come right away, but when they did, they raised even more questions. This is the story of Vanessa Marcotte. A normal day, a routine jog, and a tragedy that should have never happened. It was Sunday, August 7th, 2016. Vanessa Marcotte was visiting her mother in Princeton, Massachusetts, a quiet town where people left their doors unlocked. Around 1 p.m., she told her mom she was going for a jog. It was something she often did when she came home to visit. She wore athletic clothes, her phone in hand, and headphones around her neck. Nothing unusual. She didn't say where she was going. She never needed to. A short time later, a witness saw her near a local convenience store. She seemed calm, maybe looking for water. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. By 2:11 p.m., Vanessa's phone stopped transmitting data. No calls, no texts, no signals. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Her mom started calling her phone shortly after, but every call went unanswered. At first, there was no panic. Maybe the battery died. Maybe she went farther than planned. But hours passed. By late afternoon, her mother's concern turned into fear. Then came another detail. A passing driver noticed a dark SUV parked near a wooded area, hood up, and a man standing beside it talking on a phone. An hour later, the SUV was still there, but the man was gone. There were no sounds, no screaming, no struggle, just silence. Vanessa was known to always check in. She never missed a bus or left anyone waiting. So when she didn't return to pack for her ride back to New York, her mother knew something wasn't right. At 5 p.m., she called the police. Within hours, search teams were on the ground, using dogs and flashlights, combing the quiet trails Vanessa loved. Still, there were no signs, no phone, no footprints, just a growing sense of dread. That ordinary afternoon was no longer ordinary. It had turned into something else entirely. After Rosanna called the police around 5 p.m., things moved quickly. Officers arrived, and a search began almost immediately. Princeton might have been a small town, but this felt urgent. Neighbors, police, and K-9 units began combing the nearby woods, starting from the convenience store and stretching outward. The weather was good, the trails were dry, and there was still daylight left. Everyone hoped Vanessa had simply gotten lost. But as time passed, that hope started to fade. By 8:20 p.m., one of the dog teams picked up something in a dense patch of woods, less than a mile from the main road. The brush was thick, the path barely visible. It didn't look like a place anyone would go on foot. Searchers pushed through, flashlights cutting through the trees. That's when they saw it. Something lying still in the short grass. A young woman's body. No ID was needed. The shape, the location, the clothing, it was Vanessa. Everyone had hoped for a different outcome, but deep down they knew. The scene was unsettling. Her body was found about 60 meters from the road, far from any homes. She had no clothes on. Her sneakers were nearby, one of them partially burned. There were light burn marks on her hands and feet. Her phone and headphones were missing. Investigators quickly sealed off the area. Every inch of ground was checked, but there were no clear footprints, no tire tracks, nothing obvious. The dry grass made it hard to tell who or what had passed through. Still, they noticed signs of a struggle, crushed grass, scratches on the ground. Around her body, they found something else, faint traces of gasoline and what looked like pieces of burned paper. This wasn't just a random attack. Someone had tried to cover it up. By morning, the case was no longer a missing person report. It was now a homicide investigation, and a quiet Massachusetts town had just been pulled into something it had never seen before. As investigators secured the crime scene, forensic teams moved in. They started documenting everything, no matter how small. The location was remote and the ground dry, so there were no clear footprints. But there were signs something violent had taken place. The grass was pressed down in several areas. There were scratches in the dirt, as if someone had struggled to get away. And then there were the small but important details: partially burned paper near the body and a faint smell of gasoline in the air. Vanessa's phone and headphones were nowhere to be found. Investigators believed they had been taken, likely to destroy evidence. The partial burn marks on her hands and feet suggested someone had tried to set her body on fire, but had stopped midway. The autopsy confirmed what many feared. Vanessa had been strangled. She had defensive wounds on her hands and arms, proof she had fought back. But the most important discovery came from under her fingernails. Skin cells, DNA that didn't belong to her. That single detail changed everything. For the first time, investigators had something they could follow. A biological trace of the person who had attacked her. Whoever it was, Vanessa had managed to leave behind a clue. The timeline was also becoming clearer. Her phone lost signal at 2:11 p.m., and the coroner confirmed she likely died shortly after that. Everything had happened in a small window, less than 2 hours from when she left the house. Investigators now believed the killer had returned to the scene. The burns and missing items pointed to an attempt to destroy evidence that suggested planning, or at least the desire to erase any trace of the crime. This wasn't just an act of violence. It was personal, deliberate. The case was no longer just about who, it was now about why, and the pressure to find answers was growing fast. While forensic teams were working on evidence from the scene, investigators turned their focus to the area Vanessa might have passed through. They spoke to residents, reviewed available traffic footage, and logged every call that came in with tips. Even though Princeton was a small town with limited security cameras, one detail stood out. A witness remembered seeing a dark-colored SUV parked near the woods that afternoon. The hood was up. A man was standing beside it, holding a phone. It was close to the time Vanessa's phone had lost signal. An hour later, the SUV was still there, but the man had vanished. The description was specific: Hispanic male, athletic build, short hair. Police used that information to pull records of all SUV owners who had been in or near Princeton that day. They looked at people with work ties to the area, delivery routes, and service calls. That's when one name stood out: Angelo Colon Ortiz. He lived in Worcester, not far from Princeton, and worked for a private delivery company. Records showed he had been assigned to deliveries in the area on the day Vanessa disappeared. When police first spoke with him, he appeared calm. He said he didn't know anyone named Vanessa Marcotte. He claimed he had been home that day, then later changed his story, saying he might have driven around but couldn't remember exactly where. Investigators noticed his behavior shift during questioning. His answers grew vague. His eyes avoided contact. He started to hesitate. None of it was enough for an arrest, but it was enough to push further. Police asked for a DNA sample. At first, Angelo agreed and signed the form, but later, his legal team challenged it, claiming he hadn't fully understood his rights because of a language barrier. Even with that delay, the investigation gained momentum. Then came a new lead, a $5 gas station bill dated 2:35 p.m. from a location near the crime scene. That was after Vanessa's phone had gone dark. It supported the theory that the suspect had returned, maybe to burn evidence, and the timeline lined up perfectly. Now all investigators needed was confirmation from the lab. The moment the forensic lab processed the DNA found under Vanessa's fingernails, the case shifted. The sample was a direct match to Angelo Colon Ortiz. It wasn't partial. It wasn't a maybe. It was 100%. For investigators, this was the breakthrough they needed. Vanessa had fought back, and in doing so, She had unknowingly left behind the identity of her killer. Police moved quickly. They contacted Angelo again, this time with the DNA match on record. But his reaction was different now. He didn't speak. He didn't deny. He just looked down and stayed quiet. That silence said more than words ever could. Still, the process didn't move forward easily. Angelo's defense team pushed back, claiming that when he signed the consent form for DNA testing, he didn't fully understand what he was agreeing to. They said there had been a language barrier, that he wasn't fluent in English and hadn't been given proper legal explanation. The court paused to review the situation. Prosecutors responded by pointing out that an interpreter had been present during the initial conversation. While the interpreter didn't speak Angelo's exact dialect, they argued that the process had followed protocol. The form had been signed. No one had forced him. At the same time, another piece of independent evidence backed up the DNA. A receipt from a nearby gas station showed that Angelo had bought gas at 2:35 p.m. That was roughly 25 minutes after Vanessa's phone went dark, matching the theory that the killer returned to the scene to destroy evidence. Now, investigators had two key elements: biological proof and a time-stamped action consistent with the cover-up theory. Despite the legal pushback, the court ruled in favor of the prosecution. The DNA evidence would remain valid. With that, prosecutors moved forward. On April 15, 2017, Angelo Colon Ortiz was formally arrested. The charge: first-degree murder and unarmed robbery. The case, once stuck in silence, now had a clear name attached to it. But even with that arrest, the story was far from over. After Angelo Colon Ortiz was arrested, the case entered the pretrial phase. Over the next several years, both legal teams reviewed the evidence in detail. Every piece, from the DNA to the gas station receipt, was re-examined. The defense continued to argue that the DNA collection had been mishandled. They insisted Angelo didn't fully understand his rights when he signed the consent form, but the prosecution stood firm. They said proper steps were followed, including providing an interpreter during questioning. The court ultimately ruled that the DNA evidence would remain part of the case. With a public trial approaching and the evidence stacked against him, Angelo's legal team began discussing a possible plea deal. Vanessa's family was consulted closely. After waiting 6 long years, they chose to avoid a painful trial filled with graphic details. In October 2022, Angelo Colon Ortiz pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and unarmed robbery. In court, he said nothing. He kept his head down as the judge read the sentence: 20 years for robbery, followed by life in prison with a minimum of 25 years for the murder. A total of at least 45 years behind bars. Vanessa's mother, Rosanna, was given the chance to speak. Through tears, she told the court that her life had been broken since the day her daughter was taken. "I will never see her walk down the aisle. I'll never be the grandmother I dreamed of being," she said. Her words left the courtroom silent. Justice had finally been served, but it came at a cost the family would carry forever. The courtroom verdict brought a sense of closure, but not peace. For Vanessa's family, no sentence could restore what they had lost. Her life had been filled with potential, and it ended in silence on a quiet road she had walked many times before. The public reaction was strong. News of the guilty plea spread quickly. Thousands of people, many who had never met Vanessa, shared posts honoring her life and expressing relief that justice had finally been served. But even with a conviction, the story left behind a painful truth. Danger doesn't always announce itself. In places that feel safe, harm can still hide. The case became more than a legal battle. It became a warning about the false comfort of routine. Vanessa's name now lives on through a foundation her family supports, focused on personal safety awareness and women's rights. They hope that what happened to her won't happen to someone else. The pain is still there. The questions remain. But the truth, though delayed, did come. And for that, her family finally had something solid to hold on to. What do you think about this case? Could it have been prevented? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories that go beyond the headlines, subscribe and follow the journey here on Crime Shade, where we shed light on the darkest corners of real life. This was Crime Shade. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay aware,